A former Alabama jail official, Vicky White, helped a murder suspect escape from custody after she became entangled in a romantic relationship with the suspect. Vicky told some of her coworkers that she would go out with a bang. They didn't know what she meant, but the details became clear on her last day of the job, April 29, 2022. The 56-year-old was on her way to retiring from her career as a corrections officer. Her coworkers wondered how the place would function without her. Vicky wasn't just loved by her coworkers, but she was also loved by detainees. She had been known for her competence and compassion. Vicky might have loved a lot, but she had a terrible experience finding love. Her former husband was a drug addict, and sadly her partner after her divorce died in a car crash. Luckily for Vicky, it didn't take long for her to fall in love again. 39-year-old Kerry White had been awaiting his trial at the jail Vicky was working at. He had new charges, the stabbing murder of a 58-year-old Connie Ridgway. On October 23, 2015, officers responded to a welfare check request at her apartment. Once there, sadly, they found Connie dead on her floor. Her killer left little evidence at the scene, which made finding the person responsible nearly impossible. Her case went cold, but 5 years later, a breakthrough came. In 2020, Casey White confessed to killing Connie, but later recanted his confession in court. Casey had a history of violence and had been in jail numerous times. He once shot at his ex-girlfriend and even killed her dog. It makes you wonder how a person like Vicky could fall in love with a person like Casey. But of course it didn't stop Vicky from falling in love with Casey. Vicky told her fellow employees on the day of her retirement party that she was bringing a resident to the Florence courthouse for a mental health evaluation, but the two never returned. Rick Singleton, the sheriff in Lauderdale County, said the two had a very special relationship. Vicky was giving Casey special privileges such as extra food, and they carried on a romantic relationship outside of work hours as well, with over 1,000 calls being made to Casey. Some inmates reported seeing Casey pass Vicky letters that weren't addressed or stamped with postage. Ultimately, as detectives would find out, those letters weren't written for someone on the outside, but rather for Vicky, who was on the inside. And far too close to Casey. Vicky was starting to sneak into Casey's cell where they became intimate. Her friends didn't know much about her love life besides the fact that she said she was dating a younger man, and that man ended up being Casey White. Gary Cornelius, a retired first lieutenant of the Fairfax County, Virginia Sheriff's Office who trains correction officers, said longtime and even top prison employees develop risk not only for burnout but for manipulation, especially if they're stressed over low pay, long hours, and poor working conditions. Sharing things like marital status or criticizing a fellow officer to an inmate might be signs of a slippery slope. When it comes to romantic entanglements with prisoners, inmates often have a long time to survey their prey and target the lonely. In the weeks leading up to the escape, Vicky White sold her house for well under market value. She sold it for just over $95,000 and it was valued at $235,000. She also purchased a 2007 Ford Edge, one of several vehicles they used to flee. In the weeks ahead of the escape, Vicky purchased men's clothes at Kohl's store. She also visited a sex shop and bought some lingerie, which she brings up to her partner over the phone. She also purchased a few guns as well. The strange thing is Vicky was able to take Casey out by herself, even though jail policy stated someone with a record like Casey's needed to be escorted by at least 2 guards. The video showing Vicky escorting Casey was proof to her family and friends that she was not being forced to do anything and she willingly helped Casey out. The escape set off an 11-day manhunt. An arrest warrant was issued for Vicky White, and the governor announced a $5,000 reward for each of the pair. On May 9, 2022, the pair was spotted abandoning a car at a car wash. A chase ensued involving U.S. Marshals, FBI agents, and county deputies. Law enforcement officials collided with Casey and Vicky White's car, causing it to overturn. Sadly, after the crash, Vicky White shot herself, and Casey White was apprehended and taken to the hospital with minor injuries. Vicky's friends and coworkers couldn't believe what she had done, but it became clear that she had chosen to do it. Casey White was charged with first-degree escape and felony murder for the death of Vicky White. Casey pleaded guilty to the escape charges in exchange for dropping the felony murder charge. He was sentenced to life in prison in June 2023. Casey White told the court, "I feel like the most hated man in the world. I loved Vicky and I wouldn't drag her name through the mud for anyone in the courtroom. Vicky took me out because she said right was right, wrong is wrong. First person to show me affection. First person to give me a hug in 6 years."